Oh my goodness. All aboard. Y'all, what's it been? Like almost a year, methinks? Wow, I know. Almost a year since y'all last got a ride on the Black Bunny Hole ship. Um, it's been so long. I can't remember if I had a name for the ship or if we kind of were just winging it. I don't want to define it. I don't want to limit my this vessel with um, names. I don't want to encumber it. Hey, this is your captain speaking. Sheba here. Welcome to Black Bunny Hole. Thank you for joining me. Um, been away, been learning, man, about the collective. My goodness. Whew, what a time period in history we're living through. Hey, folks, quite wild if you ask me. But like what came through to me very clearly was I got to do another Black Bunny Hole about this person whom I'm about to introduce to you. The person we are going to be talking about today is Harriet Tubman. Whoa! Do I have a sound effects? Oh, actually, I don't know if that did anything, but yeah, okay. We're gonna go here, and then I'm gonna type in. Oh my god, these nails. Oh gosh. There we go. Probably most famous Harriet. I think we can all agree. Just right off the bat, look at her. She got a commemorative coin. Let's go, mama. Love always with a good bandana. Which do you feel like Dolce and Gabbana or whatever, like, or what is it? Louis Vuitton stole that. That's like it's close. Okay, all right. Harriet. Okay, you know why I picked her? Many reasons, and I'll tell you throughout this episode. One, she's a Maryland girl, fellow Maryland girl. So I obviously had to be like, okay, well, mama. Um, and I feel like a Maryland girl with like a thirst for liberation. I feel very seen. Okay. All right, let's hop in. First of all, Mama's name is actually Araminta Ross. What? They called her Minty. So cute. Um, Araminta Minty Ross, born in Dorchester County, Maryland, to enslaved parents. Her mama's name was Harriet, and they called her Rit. Isn't that cute? Rit. Harriet and Ben. Harriet Green, Ben Ross. They were enslaved by two different people who got married to each other, and yeah, they were up in Dorchester County. Okay, this is about 1822. Harriet comes on the scene. She is the middle of ninth of nine children. So also another thing, Sheba happens to be a middle child, of like only three children, but like that's interesting. Um, we don't know like too much about her ancestry, except that her maternal grandmother, Modesty, arrived on a slave ship from Africa. And like when Harriet, little Minty, was a kid, people were like, oh, you kind of like remind us of like Ashanti tribe. So like she thought she was from there. Anyway, from her character traits. Like, I wonder what that means. Anyway, um, her mother, this says her mother, Rit, who may have had a white father, interesting, was a cook for the family. Her father was a skilled woodsman who managed the timber work on the plantation. Um, so it looks like, of course, obviously, Rit, who is Harriet's mama, um, her family was torn apart by the people that enslaved them. They sold her first three daughters, separating them from the family forever. And then when this Georgia trader came to try to buy her youngest child, Moses, she was like, wait, where am I? When a trader from Georgia, blah, 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 blah. Okay, she hid him for a month, aided by a bunch of the other enslaved people and the freedmen in the community. Because in Eastern Maryland at the time, in Maryland, it was like maybe 50% freed black people. So there was like a lot of freed and enslaved black people in the community. Anyway, they hid him. And at one point, she like confronted her enslaver about it. And when like the guy and the Georgia man who was trying to buy her kid came to take the child, she was like, "You are after my son, but the first man that comes into my house, I will split his head open." Oh! Anyway, then her enslaver backed off and abandoned the sale. Tubman's biographers agree that stories told about this event within the family influenced her belief in the possibilities of resistance. So, importance of parents modeling resistance, even even when white people were extra terrible. Okay, so Harriet's mom was assigned to the big house, so Harriet had to take care of her younger siblings. Sorry, I just had some pasta. Some just a little indigesty. Anyway, okay. When Harriet was 5 or 6 years old, she was hired out to be a nursemaid for this white woman. And she had to like take care of the baby and rock the cradle as it slept. If the baby woke up and cried, they whipped 5 or 6 year old Harriet Tubman. Now, white people, white women. Anyway, she recounted like on this one day she was whipped like 5 times before breakfast. Apparently she found ways to resist, such as running away for 5 days, wearing layers of clothing as protection against beatings, and fighting back. There you go. That's what you got to do. That's what you got to do. Blah, blah, blah. She had to, check this dude's muskrat traps. As she got older, she had to do like field and forest work, drive oxen, plowing, hauling logs. Okay, so we've heard about this story. As an adolescent, she got a head injury when this overseer threw this 2-pound metal weight. He was trying to hit this other slave who was running away, and it hit Harriet instead. Yeah, and apparently it broke her skull, and she was bleeding and unconscious, and they brought her inside and just like laid her at a loom where she laid for 2 days without medical care. Anyway, of course, after she had like all these painful headaches and like seizures, and she'd like black out, but apparently she said she was still like, aware of what was happening. She just couldn't respond. Bro. After her injury, though, she began experiencing these visions, these vivid dreams, and she interpreted this as revelations from God. She apparently this had like a really profound effect on her personality, and she acquired this really passionate faith in God. She was illiterate, and because it was actually illegal back then to teach slaves, teach black people, I imagine, but slaves certainly, to read. But she was told Bible stories, and they attended like a Methodist church. So apparently, mystical inspiration guided her actions. And she rejected the teachings of the white preachers who were like urging the enslaved people to be like passive, obedient victims to like the people who were literally trafficking them and enslaving them. Um, and yeah, she was like, but she did like, like all the stories where they were talking about like deliverance and like, getting out of slavery. She was like, oh, hell yeah. Apparently, the religious perspective informed her actions throughout her life. So, again, another little similarity. I think we should do a Sheba big. Yes. Um, anyway, a similarity. Yeah. Vivid dreams and visions and mystical inspiration guiding my actions. Quite a similarity. Okay, so this is like an interesting kind of thing. Like, apparently, the dude that enslaved Harriet's dad had in his will that like the kids would be freed at the age of 45, and that any like child born to Harriet's mom when she was after the age of 45 would not be slaves. That was in the will. They would be freeborn. Anyway, like after that guy died, they just ignored that stipulation. The white people just ignored the stipulation, and it was going to be like pretty impossible for Harriet or the family to try to enforce it. Like, white people, really? Like, that's your ancestors. Not cool. Just weaponizing the law again to like be like, guess you can't, you can sue us if you want. Like, oh, you punks. Anyway, 1844, when she was like, what is that? She was born in 22. So when she was, that is 22. When she was 22, she married John Tubman, a free black man. Although apparently, like, little is known about their time together. It was like kind of complicated because he was free and she was enslaved. Apparently, like, maybe he was gonna try to like buy her slavery, buy her freedom. That was a thing you could do. And like it was like pretty common for there to be like blended enslaved free families back then. In Eastern Shore, Maryland, at least. So apparently, once she got married, that's when she changed her name from Araminta, because all this time she was going by Minty. Everyone knew her as Minty because that was her name. She changed it to Harriet, which is her mother's name, which is interesting. Changed her name from Araminta to Harriet soon after her marriage. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Okay, now she's about to escape from slavery. All right. Can you guys see this? Should I? Oh, what does the large text look like? Did that do anything? Kinda. But let's make it even bigger. Too big? No, it's great. Okay. There we go. Escaping from slavery. Okay. 1849, Harriet Tubman got sick. She had gotten like measles a little bit ago. Now she was sick again. And now she's like, what, 27-ish years old? She got sick. That apparently diminishes one's value as a slave to slave traders, which, like, good. Maybe she was making herself sick. I don't know. Anyway, the enslaver tried to sell her but couldn't find a buyer. And she got really angry at him. She was like, why is this motherfucker still trying to sell me? What the fuck? Because I bet, like, he, like, acted all, like, like, oh, yeah, totally, love you so much, like, I bet they, like, tried to act like they were, like, decent people. Anyway, Tubman began to pray to God that he, like, make him change his ways. She said, I prayed all night long for my master till the 1st of March, and all the time he was bringing people to look at me and trying to sell me. When it appeared, that he was going to go through with the sale, she was like, okay, God, please kill this guy. If you're not going to change his heart. All right. If you're not going to change his heart, please kill him. And a week later, he died. I always say the power. Why don't we try more? Everyone's like, oh, you shouldn't wish anyone dead. Maybe we should try it. Has anyone been trying to wish Netanyahu dead or something? Maybe we should try, you know? Anyway, a week later, the guy dies. And apparently Harriet Tubman expressed regret for her earlier sentiments. But that's where we diverge. So I'd have been like, oh, okay. Oh, no. Oh, thoughts and prayers. Thoughts and prayers, my enslaver. Girl, please. Okay. All right. So, but now that this guy dies and you do this estate settlement, since they are considered property, his widow is trying to set up a sale, trying to get some money. And so she was like, all right, well, I got to go. This is an interesting little tidbit. Tubman refused to wait for the white family, the enslavers, to decide her fate, despite her husband's efforts to dissuade her. Her free black husband was dissuading her from trying to escape from slavery. She later said that there was one of two things I had a right to, liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would have the other. And you know what? I bet that John fucking Henry dude stole that from her. Patrick Henry? Who knows? Anyway, so in September 1849, Tubman and her two brothers, Ben and Henry, escaped. They one of the brothers had been hired out, so apparently they didn't notice immediately, so they had a kind of 2 weeks head start. But then that bitch Eliza Brodus, posted a runaway notice offering a reward of up to $100 each, equivalent to almost $4,000 modern day, for their capture and return. Once they'd left, once they escaped, the men had second thoughts, and they were like, oh, maybe not. One of them was like, oh, I kind of regret leaving his wife and child, which yeah. Anyway, the two men went back, and so that forced Harriet to return with them. But 2 months later, she was like, I'm leaving. I got to leave without these dudes. Sorry. I'll come and get you later, but I got to go. And she did it. Before leaving, she sang a farewell song to hint at her intentions, which she hoped would be understood by Mary, a trusted fellow slave. I'll meet you in the morning. I'm bound for the promised land. Love it. Anyway, takes the Underground Railroad. Of course, we know that a journey of nearly 90 miles from Maryland to Pennsylvania on foot takes 5 days to 3 weeks. And she has to travel at night, usually. Guided by the North Star, trying to avoid the slave catchers. Because does it already get to the Fugitive Slave Act? They have this Fugitive Slave Act. So even in the free states, in the northern states, you still have to extradite these fugitives, slaves, to. I don't know if that's what 12 Years a Slave is about, but yeah. Anyway, okay, yeah. So when she first crossed into Pennsylvania, she was like, oh my God, I felt like I was in heaven. It was so amazing. Just relief and awe. After she got to Philadelphia, she was like, I don't know anyone here. Everyone she knows is in Maryland. And so Yeah. So apparently in 1850, they passed this fugitive slave law, which forced law enforcement officials, forced them, to assist in the capture of escaped slaves, even in states that had outlawed slavery, and heavily punished abetting slave escape. Like white people, like you didn't have to do that actually. But okay. Um anyway, apparently, yeah, blah 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 blah. Okay, so December 1850, maybe a year later, she found out that her niece was about to be and her niece's children were about to be sold. And so she went to Baltimore, um, hooked up with yeah, yeah, like some family, her brother-in-law, this freed black man, um, and they like make this escape on a log canoe. They go to Baltimore and then they like go on to Philly. Um, the next year, she goes to Maryland, takes more of her family members, um, including, her youngest brother, Moses. It started to, like, word of what she was doing started to, like, reach people, and her family started to be encouraged. And she got more confident with each trip to Maryland. Like, yes, she was like, oh my God, this is easier than I thought. Holy shit. Um, Anyway, okay, late 1851, she goes back to Dorchester County, which is where she was from, for the first time since her escape. She escaped in 49, so like 2 years ago, right? Yeah. So she's going back. She wants to find her husband and take him to the north with her. When she arrives, she finds her husband, John. She learns that he's married another woman named Caroline. Tubman was like, all right, like, let him know I'm here, and that you should join me. And he insisted that he was happy where he was. Ho. Suppressing her anger, she found some enslaved people and, wanted to escape and led them to Philly instead. Ain't that like a man? Anyway, um, okay, she apparently, okay, like there's evidence that she stopped at Frederick Douglass's house. Apparently they both like really admired each other. Of course, they were, both struggled against slavery. um Years later, he contrasted his efforts with hers, saying, most that I have done and suffered in the service of our cause has been in public, and I've received much encouragement at every step of the way. You, on the other hand, have labored in a private way. I've wrought in the day, you in the night. The midnight sky and the silent stars have been the witness of your devotion to freedom and your heroism, excepting John Brown of sacred memory. I know of no one who has willingly encountered more perils and hardships to serve our enslaved people than you have. That's beautiful. That's another place me and Harriet are going to differ because, like, I am going to labor in a private way and a public way, and yeah, so um, okay, yeah. From 1851 to 1862, she took about like 13 expeditions. She rescues like 70 slaves, including her other brothers and their wives and children. She got the nickname Moses for leading people to the promised land. One of her last missions was to get her aging parents. Um, yeah, yeah. Um, she took them up to Canada to hide them. Yeah, she took a lot of different routes and stuff, and her work involved a lot of subterfuge. She used a lot of disguises. She would like, just kind of like wear a bonnet and like carry like chickens around, pretend she was just like a slave running errands. One time she found like she saw like a former enslaver, and she like threw the chickens up to make a commotion so she like could avoid eye contact. This other time she like recognized a guy on the train as like a former enslaver, and she just like pretended to read the newspaper because she's illiterate, and he ignored her. Like, also like white people and black people maybe, like, isn't that interesting that like a lot of her success is just like people not noticing her. They're taught to not pay attention to like a black woman. Um, yeah. Anyway, okay, let's see where we at. Blah blah blah. Staying with people on the Underground Railroad. Okay, her faith was another important resource as she like kept making the trips. The visions from her childhood head injury continued, and she saw them as divine premonitions. She spoke of consulting with God and trusted that he would keep her safe. She used spirituals as coded messages. She carried a revolver as protection from slave catchers and their dogs. And she threatened to shoot anyone who tried to turn back, since that was going to like risk everyone else's safety. And, like they include this like one story of this guy who was going to go back, and she like pointed a gun at him, and he got it together and crossed with them to Canada. Like, dudes, can you just like cool it? Can you just trust? Yeesh. Okay, but by the 1850s, the late 1850s, the Eastern Shore slave owners were like, okay, where are all of our freaking slaves going? They like keep escaping. And they were like, okay, it's probably the free blacks or the abolitionists. They did not suspect that Minty, the petite disabled woman who had run away years before, was responsible for freeing so many enslaved people. That's another thing. Yeah, she is like a disabled woman too. This is like a disability rights like hero and icon, disability justice icon. I love. And like, yes, like she's just like, oh, who, me? I'm just a slave. Oh, I don't know nothing. Dummies. Tubman and the fugitives, which weird way to phrase that. Tubman and the fugitives she assisted were never captured. Oh, hell yeah. Years later, she told an audience, I was a conductor of the Underground Railroad for 8 years, and I can say what most conductors can't say. I never ran my train off the track, and I never lost a passenger. Which I think speaks to kind of how dangerous train travel was back then. Like, most train conductors couldn't say that they never lost a passenger. Like, that's terrifying. Anyway, John Brown. Okay, 1858. She meets John Brown, this white man, great beard. He was an insurgent who advocated the use of violence to destroy slavery in the United States. Which, white men, like, they're like, violence, that's the answer. Let's try it. That's like they're always their go-to. So she wasn't like previously involved in armed insurrections, but she was like, I agree with your course of direct action, and I support your goals. Apparently Tubman and John Brown like spoke of being called by God and trusted the divine to protect him from the wrath of slavers. And she claimed to have a prophetic vision of meeting him, like, before they did. Apparently, Brown was joined by, he called her General Tubman. That's cute. Because she knew all the support networks and resources in Maryland and Pennsylvania and stuff. And so she helped him plan it. And Brown dreamed of fighting to create a new state for those freed from slavery, and made preparations for military action. White men, white people. Like, I think even like your intentions are good, I think, but your dream is always of fighting to create a new state for those freed from slavery. Like, why is your thing always like, let's make a state, we'll kill all the people that live there, and we'll put our preferred people there? Like, maybe that's not the answer, guys. Anyway, of course, he asked Harriet to gather some slaves who might be willing to join the fighting force. because he believed that, like, after he began the first battle, the enslaved would rise up and carry out a rebellion across the slave states. Apparently, like, his plan was leaked, and so they had to, like, reschedule it. And when they rescheduled it, Harriet was sick. So it wasn't like like it's not sure if she was like gonna go anyway, or if she like was like skeptical. But I think it would probably be smart to be like, I don't know if this like following this white man has ever led us to a good place. So anyway, long story short, raid failed. He was convicted of treason, but all of the abolitionists saw him as like a martyr and a proud symbol of resistance. She spoke of him and said, he done more in dying than 100 men would in living. And that is true. Like, in many ways. Like, 100 men living back then, like, ugh, the worst. Okay. So, like, November 1860 was her last rescue mission. She was going to try to rescue her sister. But, like, she couldn't do it. Like, apparently, like, she could rescue the children only if she could pay a bribe of $30 or, like, 1,000 in today's money. She didn't have the money, so the children remain enslaved. Their fates remain unknown. So she never got to rescue... never got to affect the escape of her sister, which I'm also like, what if you know me, like if my sister was like, hey, we're getting free, I'm like, girl, when we going? When you took our brother? No, come on, me. I'm ready. So I'm like, maybe she didn't want to go, but anyway, okay. Yeah, they made it. Okay, now that brings us to the Civil War, which broke out in 1861. Tubman, when it broke out, had this vision that the war was going to lead to the abolition of slavery. So enslaved people near Union positions, they started escaping in large numbers. There was this Union general who declared these escapees. He's a Union Army general, a politician, a lawyer from Massachusetts. He considered these escapees contraband property that had been seized from these like slave owners. God, white people, the worst. So like held them kind of as like refugees, put them to work, of course, and didn't pay them. Tubman volunteered to support the Union cause and helping the refugees in the camps. That's literally what they call them. That's crazy. So she meets in South Carolina this General David Hunter, who was a big supporter of abolition. And they began, he declared all of the contraband enslaved people free, and began gathering like the formerly enslaved for like a regiment of black soldiers. None other than President Abraham Lincoln was like, oh, I don't know if we're like ready to like free the slaves yet, actually. So we're gonna reprimand you for doing that. And so slavery went on for like another year. That is another thing white people will do. They will send a reprimand. They love an order, and like they're like, oh, there's a process. Like, anyway, Tubman, of course, condemned Lincoln's response and his general unwillingness to consider ending slavery in the U.S. She said, what did he say? Yeah, she's like, if you set black people free, then you're going to save a lot of money. I know you only care about that. So, but You know, do white men listen? No. Um, she was a nurse when she was at this one port. At first, she received government rations for her work, but she was like, I don't want to, look like I'm getting special treatment. So she gave up her right to those supplies and made her money by selling pies and root beer that she made in the evenings. Yes, my revolutionary queen. Yes, anarchy. Um, she's got it. She scouts for this Combahee River raid, which is okay. So Lincoln issues the Emancipation Proclamation like a year after that other guy was like, okay, let's feed him. Anyway, Harriet was like, that's like a step forward, but it's incomplete towards our goal of liberating all black people. So not great. And so she turned her efforts to how to beat the Confederacy. She scouts this area and they plan this raid. She guided these steamboats with black soldiers to these plantations, and they said the Union troops set fire to the plantations, destroying all the infrastructure, taking thousands of dollars worth of food and supplies. Harriet had warned all the slaves of what was going to happen, so they were ready. So when they heard the steamboats, all the slaves, the formerly enslaved, were they had pots of rice that they'd cooked. They had pigs. They just threw their babies over their back and they ran to the boats. They saved 750 people. Ooh, love it. Newspapers heralded Tubman's patriotism, sagacity. That's a great name. That's a great word. I hope to be called that one day. Energy and ability, blah, blah, blah. She recruited a bunch of people. More than 100 of the newly enslaved joined the Union Army. And she's been credited as the first woman to lead U.S. troops in an armed assault. Maryland girl. Yes, mama. Blah, blah, blah. Kept working as a nurse for 2 more years. Okay. Now, this is, again, where me and Harriet Tubman's, stories will diverge. But she received little pay for her Union military service. She wasn't a regular soldier. So they only occasionally paid her for her work as a spy and a scout. And her nurse work was entirely unpaid. That's how we that's how we started, not paying women for their very valuable freaking labor. Even back then, they were just yeah, you nurse the men back to health. Ugh, why? For this? For over 3 years of service, she got $200, which was the equivalent of about $4,000 today. Now, okay. Her unofficial status caused great difficulty in documenting her service, and the government was slow to recognize any debt to her. God. Oh my God. Yep. And apparently her humanitarian work for her family and the formerly enslaved kept her in a state of constant poverty. Again, that is where our tales will diverge, because I'm going to receive more wealth and abundance the more I share myself with the world. So, so she, this promised military appointment fell through. So some white man was like, no. So she was like, all right, let me go back home. She has a home in New York. That's her. When she got free, she went to New York. When she was on a train ride to New York in October 1865, she traveled on a half fare ticket because of her service. They gave that to her. A conductor told her to move from a regular passenger car into the less desirable smoking car. When she refused, he cursed at and grabbed her. She resisted, and he summoned additional men for help. They muscled her into the smoking car, injuring her in the process. But as these events transpired, white passengers, guess what they did? Cursed Tubman and told the conductor to kick her off the train. Anyway, she goes to New York. She spends her years. She's tending to the family. She buys this farm. She takes in boarders. This is fun. Okay, one of the people she takes in is a farmer named Nelson Davis. He was born enslaved in North Carolina, was a private in the Union Army. He began working as a bricklayer, and he fell in love with Harriet. So they got married, even though he was 22 years younger than her. So this is 1869. I think she was about 47 years old. So Harriet Tubman getting herself a little young buck of a 27-year-old man. I love that. And then they adopted a baby girl named Gertie a couple years later. Also, you know, people like, I saw this picture of them. Where is it? Where is this? Can y'all see that? I think this is from later. Okay, that's a picture from later. Oh, from 1887. I was like, that guy's 27? That man does not look 27. Okay, he's not. All right. So Tubman's friends and supporters from her abolition days, supported her, raised funds. An admirer wrote a biography. She got about like what would be today like $28,000 for it. Even with this assistance, paying off the mortgage on the farm exhausted her savings. And then that October, she fell prey to swindlers. 2 black men claimed to know a former slave who had a trunk of gold coins smuggled out of South Carolina, which they would sell for cash at less than half the coin's value. Apparently, like, she knew, like, that's what a lot of white people did back then. They would, like, bury their coins when they realized Union forces were coming. And so, yeah, she was like, that sounds legit. She borrowed some money from a wealthy friend and arranged to receive the gold late one night. Once the men had lured her into the woods, they knocked her out with chloroform and stole her purse. They knocked out Harriet Tubman and stole her purse. Do you think they're like, their family like never talks about that? They're like, we don't talk about daddy. Anyway, Tubman was found dazed and injured. The trunk was filled with rocks. Now, lot of men who have done bad things in this story, and black men. I'm not loving how we treated Mama Harriet, you know? Okay, so the crime, though, it did bring, like, national attention to Tubman's, precarious financial situation. And so they, like, renewed efforts to get her payment from the government, repayment from the government for services rendered, of course. So these representatives, Clinton McDougal, who is actually a Scottish man. How is this white man from Scotland able to, like, do more than, like, a black woman from Maryland? But whatever. Anyway, they introduced this bill to pay her $2,000, a lump sum, which is about $54,000 for services rendered as a scout, nurse, and spy. But you know what happened? It was defeated by the Senate. They said, no, Harriet Tubman doesn't deserve that payment. And then in February 1880, her wood-framed house burned down. Her supporters replaced it with a new brick home, but still. Then Nelson dies of tuberculosis. I was kind of wondering, where the hell is Nelson at? Where's he laying these bricks? Okay. But yeah, died 1888. But that did make her eligible to get a widow's pension a couple years later. So she got $8 a month, which is the equivalent of $290 a month these days. Um, yeah. Anyway, like they introduced another bill to try to grant her a soldier's monthly pension of $25, which is like $920 today. But you know what happened? Some members of Congress objected to a woman being paid a full soldier's pension. So Harriet Tubman didn't get $920 because of she was a woman. Y'all, I can't even. They approved a compromise amount of $20, equivalent to $730 per month, which was actually the $8 from her widow's pension that she was already getting, plus $12 for her service as a nurse. They didn't acknowledge her stuff as a scout or a spy. These white people, I swear to God. One, love this like picture of Harriet like serving in this like all white like what is she at that Drake White party right now? Like, oh, I love that for her. Um, so yeah, like after that, she started doing women's suffrage, and she, traveled to New York, Boston, D.C., speaking on women's right to vote. Talking about what she did in the Civil War and stuff, women's, work and blah blah blah. She was invited to be a keynote speaker at a bunch of things. Like this activism like rekindled kind of national admiration for her. And so like these like suffragist papers and things gave receptions for her, like honoring her lifetime of service to the nation. However, her endless contributions to others had left her in poverty, and she had to sell a cow to buy a train ticket to these celebrations. They couldn't get her own a ticket to go to her own celebration. What in the hell? And just like, y'all, white people, these are your ancestors. These are who you come from. Like the people who were like, no, they just like don't want to help. They just like don't want to pay people for their labor. They don't want to pay people their value. Not very cool. And hold on to ill-begotten gains. Not cool. Okay, so in the 1870s, she becomes active in the Methodist Church, the AME Church. And she wants to create this Harriet Tubman home for the aged that would care for indigent colored people. She apparently had some financial limitations, but she won this bid at an auction for this farm adjacent to the one that she already owned. And she named it John Brown Hall after, honoring her ally. But apparently raising funds was difficult. And she almost lost the property, and the church had to take it over. But apparently, when the church took it over, they started charging the people coming in $100 entry fee, which was like almost like $3,400 today's money. And she was like, I wanted it to be free. I wanted it to be for like people who had no money. So why would we like make people pay to come into it? Anyway, her childhood injury started to trouble her. She had to get head surgery. Apparently, they gave her no anesthesia, and instead she had to bite down on a bullet, as she'd seen in the Civil War when they were getting their limbs amputated. Which, it's definitely giving a Gazan, a Palestinian child, just getting limbs amputated with no anesthesia. Anyway, they like gave her like, skull surgery and stuff. By 1911, she was admitted to the elder care home that she had started. A New York newspaper described her as ill and penniless, prompting supporters to offer a new round of donations. And then she died of pneumonia in 1913. Her last words, just before she died, she said, she quoted the Gospel of John saying, I go away to prepare a place for you. Now, another thing, I'm going to have much more profound last words if I have the option. So, yeah. Let's keep, this is my favorite one. Yeah. Hell yeah. So, what do you guys think? That was a good one. Oh my gosh, she's so interesting. And like, y'all, isn't that crazy? A Maryland girl with a, you know, a like vision of liberation and like a trust in the universe to support her and protect her. I thought it was interesting also of like of, you know, John Brown, Harriet Tubman, and Frederick Douglass, you know, all contemporaries, that the two black people made it out alive, you know, living a long life. Interesting. Also though, yeah, not to say I'm like Harriet Tubman, but I mean, we are both from Maryland and middle children, and like, look at all she accomplished. Also, like, she was illiterate and disabled. Imagine what a literate, able-bodied Maryland woman with a thirst for liberation could do. Yeah. Well, that's pretty much it. I don't remember if I had a sign off, but I guess I'll put on this intro and you guys can get the hell off my ship. See you next time. Yeah. See you soon. Bye. Whoop. Is it doing it? There we go.